Hi, my name is Marianne, and I'm the owner and baker and even cake decorator for Love in the Oven Bakery here in Fargo, North Dakota. I was asked by Amy to teach you guys how to make something, so I've chosen a cheesecake for you, and she's going to have this recipe for you. I've sent her both a physical copy, and I'm also going to give her a digital copy as well, so you'll have access to that. So let's go ahead and get started. Usually the best thing to do when you're baking is to have everything set out and ready to go. And it's called a fancy French phrase called mise en place. And that just basically means everything in place. So you have all of your ingredients here already measured out. And you can use traditional measurements like tablespoons and teaspoons and cups. Or if your parents or you have something like this is a scale. And what you do to use this, in case you have one, is you put your container that you're going to put an ingredient in on your scale. Obviously, it's got to be turned on. And then you'll hit this button here to zero it out. And what that does is it takes away the weight of the container. And all you're doing then is measuring the stuff that you're going to put in it. That's the most accurate way to do baking, but it's fine if you have cups and teaspoons/tablespoons, so don't worry about that. So I've got everything set up here. What you'll then want to do is come over and get your pan ready. You can either use a cake pan like this for a 6-inch cheesecake, or you can purchase something called a springform pan. And that basically has a lever on the side, and it comes in 2 pieces. You pull the lever and the bottom will come out, and then you're left with the ring. And then when you want to put it together, there's a notch on the bottom, and you'll slide the bottom into that notch and then close the lever on the side, and it becomes one piece. I'm going to be using a cake pan today since I don't have anything small enough for a springform. So what you'll first start to do is you want to get some parchment paper. Don't use wax paper. You want to use parchment paper, and that can be found at the grocery store. And what you'll want to do is use a marker or a pen or even a pencil and go around the outside of your pan. And you'll want to be looking at this as you're doing it to make sure the pen or the pencil or marker is actually working. Because if you pull it up and it hasn't actually been working, then you're not going to have a line to cut from. So then what you'll do is just take a pair of scissors, and I tend to cut in a little bit, not directly on the line, but just inside of it. But if you do end up getting some of your marker or pencil still showing on the parchment paper, that's fine. Because what you can do is just flip it over, and you won't have to worry about any of the marker or pencil getting on your cheesecake. Okay, so there's my circle. And I'm going to pretend like I have some marker on the outside edge, and I don't want that to get on the crust, so I'm going to flip it over. But to make sure it kind of sticks down, I'm going to lightly spray my pan with cooking spray, and then I'll put the parchment inside. And then you'll want to spray your parchment. This is just to make actually like really, really sure that it's going to come out when you're done. And then you want to spray the sides like that. And that's all you got to do. The next thing you want to do is you want to turn on your oven to 350 degrees. And I've got 2 different kinds of ovens here. So I'm going to be using this to bake my crust. And then I'll be using this one to bake the cheesecake itself. So the first thing we're going to do now, after we've turned on the oven and have our pan ready to go, you could also at this point melt your butter so it's ready to make your crust. You can take out your cream cheese a little bit before, like an hour or 2 before you're going to make it, so that it comes to room temperature is really soft. That way it'll mix really well with the other ingredients and won't be lumpy. kind of gross when it's lumpy. And then I have sour cream here, eggs, milk, and then I'm going to add my vanilla to the milk here. So I'm looking at the recipe here, and it says to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. So I usually hold it over the bowl. That way I don't get it everywhere. You just kind of pour it in until it comes up to the top and dump it in. And then you're good to go. Also, you usually leave like a paper towel or a piece of parchment on the side. You can even use your leftover parchment when you cut the circle out and just put your dirty tools on there. That way it's really easy to not have to worry about cleaning up your table too. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is make my crust. And the crust takes melted butter and graham cracker crumbs. If you don't have any graham cracker crumbs, sometimes they'll come in boxes that you can buy them in the grocery store, like in the baking aisle. But if you don't have any, it's just fine. Go ahead and get graham cracker crumbs in the whole ones in the packages. And then you'll just crush them up with put them in a bag, crush them up with a rolling pin, and they can end up like that. So we're gonna go ahead and pour the crumbs into the butter here. And I'm gonna kind of squish it around because the butter is gonna immediately get absorbed by the first crumbs that are touching it. But you're still gonna have some that don't have any butter soaked into them. So I'm kind of squishing it together to get that butter absorbed into the dry crumbs. You can kind of tell which ones have butter in them and which ones don't. The ones that don't are kind of lighter colored. So I just kind of squish this around, stir it, and we have our crumbs ready. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take our pan that's already ready to go, and we're going to dump the crumbs in. I'm not gonna use all of them. I've used maybe about 2/3 of what I've got, because it's a pretty small cheesecake and you don't want a huge thick crust. Although maybe the person you're making this for loves crust, in which case add it all. So now what I'm doing is I'm just using this silicone spatula to push it down. Another way you can do it is to use your fingers and push it down like this, or you can use like the back of a measuring cup. Any of those will work. And the goal is to try and get it flat, stuck together, and kind of even. You don't want it to be thicker, really thicker on one side and really thin on the other. So when I pour it in, I kind of try to like disperse it across the bottom of the pan so there's like an even amount of crumbs across the bottom. So now we're ready to bake. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in here. And we're going to bake that for 10 minutes. So I set my timer, and you'll hear a loud sound in about 10 minutes, and we'll know that it's ready to pull out. It's just reminded me, I forgot my oven mitts. So I'm going to see if I can find some over here. Nope. I'll have to go back and grab some in a minute. In any case, so while that's baking, the next thing that we're going to work on is the filling. So the filling is 16 ounces of cream cheese, softened and at room temperature. You can use an electric hand mixer, or if your parents or you have a stand mixer like this one, you can use that instead. So what I'm doing is just trying to get all of the cream cheese off of my spatula here into the bowl. And it's still a little hard in the middle, so that's my fault. So I'm going to break it up a little bit into smaller pieces. And then I'm going to scrape off the spatula to get as much of the cream cheese into the bowl as I can. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to start by beating the cream cheese to get it smoother. So you'll put this on your stand mixer if you have that, or you'll get out your electric hand mixer, put the beaters on that, and then you go ahead and do that on a low speed until it starts to soften a little bit in the bowl, and then you can start increasing the speed on your hand mixer or your stand mixer so it goes a little more quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now because it looks like it's smoothing out against the sides of the bowl. Speeding it up also helps get some of the cream cheese that's stuck to the beater or the beaters onto the bowl itself because it kind of flings it. That way you get all of it mixed and smooth. So I'm going to let that run for a few minutes and then we're going to scrape down the side of the bowl. Okay, so what you do when you scrape down the sides is you want to take your beater, whether it's the two from your handheld or this one from the stand mixer, and I'm going to want to get all of the bits that I can off of it. It doesn't have to be perfect, just do the best you can. All right, like I said, doesn't be perfect. That's got most of it, so I'm just gonna stick that there. And then I'm gonna scrape down the sides because some of it on the bottom and on the sides is not gonna be completely smoothed out. And so I'm trying to help the beater get all of it as smooth as I can. All right, I'm gonna put this back. And we're going to beat it for another minute or so. And I'm just looking at the cream cheese to make sure most of it is smooth. Let me move this so maybe see a little better. And that's looking pretty good. I can see a few lumps, but they're not very big. Most of it is really smooth. So I think we can add the rest of our ingredients now. So the first thing I'm going to add is the sour cream. Before I turn on the mixer, I'm going to scrape down the sides of the bowl again. That's to make sure that none of the sour cream is off by itself, that's mixed fully into the cream, all of the cream cheese. Because sometimes you'll get parts of it that aren't completely mixed together, and that's not going to be very yummy. So I'm going to scrape the beaters again. Okay, got most of it, good enough. And then I'm going to scrape down the sides. Don't have to mix it at this point, you can just let the beaters do it. But I'm just wanting to make sure it's nice and mixed. Okay, good enough. I'll go ahead and beat this for a minute or so, or until you see that all the sour cream has been mixed into the cream cheese. cream cheese is a little yellow, so you'll be able to tell if there's any sour cream that hasn't been mixed in because you'll see white streaks. Doesn't take very long, it's pretty much already mixed. So now what I'm gonna do is turn off my mixer and I'm gonna add the milk with the vanilla. Just pour that in and we'll mix it until it's all mixed together. You don't want to turn up your beaters on high after you add something like milk, because then the milk, because it's lighter, is gonna go flying everywhere. So turn it on low until it starts to mix together, and then you can turn it up again. Doesn't take very long. Okay, I'm going to scrape the sides of the bowl and the beater again. And I'm going to be a little more careful this time because I'm seeing parts of the cream cheese mixture that haven't mixed with the milk or the sour cream that are on the beaters. And I can see some on the side of the bowl too. It looks a little less smooth and liquidy. It looks a little more clumpy. And I'm going to use the side of my beater to clean off my spatula a little bit. That's pretty good. So now we're going to add the eggs one at a time. And I like to break them into a bowl separately so that if any shells fall into the egg, I can reach in and pull them out more easily. If you crack them directly into your mix, you might get some shells, and then it's harder to see them because the mixture is white. So I'm keeping it on low, and I'm just gonna pour it. Oh, both eggs went in. All right, that's fine. So what I'm gonna do is let this mix on low until I don't see any yellow. And then I'll turn it up after I scrape down the bowl again to make sure everything is fully combined. They usually want you to do one egg at a time to make sure that each egg fully incorporates or mixes into your mixture. But no worries if they both go in. Okay, I don't see any yellow streaks, so I'm going to turn up my mixer now. Give that a few seconds, and then I'm going to scrape down the sides. I'm going to show you why here in a second. Now, I don't know if you can see the sides of the bowl, but the mixture is kind of like a yellowish color. But you can see some of the cheesecake and sour cream and milk that haven't fully mixed in on the sides because it's a little whiter. And it looks a little different. And you can even see some up here. Okay. The whole point of this is to make sure you don't have any parts of your cheesecake that don't bake correctly. That's telling us that our crust is done. I'm going to go grab a towel so I can pull that out without burning my hands. So your crust, when you pull it out, is going to be a golden brown color, especially on the edges next to the pan. And that's what you want to see. So now I'm going to go ahead and finish mixing this together. Scrape down the sides. And I don't know if you can see it in this light, but right here it's kind of white, and all around it it's a little bit yellow. So not everything is mixed together. If you're using a stand mixer, you want to make sure that you do the bottom too, because the beater doesn't reach down. I don't know if you can see the texture difference. This is like kind of liquidy and smooth, and this stuff right here looks kind of lumpy. So that means that it's not fully mixed, and that's why you need to scrape the bottom too. You're almost done. We'll do one last mix, and then we'll pour it into our crust. Let that mix. While that's mixing, one final time, I'm going to go get some warm or hot water. If you're nervous about adding hot water to the pan, which I'll show you in a minute over here, you could be more than welcome to have one of your parents help you, or an older sibling. I know some people get nervous around hot stuff. I tend to burn myself a lot, so I totally understand. All right, I'm gonna go get my water now, and I'll explain why in a second. All right. So the reason why we're going to use water to bake our cheesecake in is because otherwise it will tend to crack on the top. It's not the end of the world. It'll still taste yummy. But if you want it to look really nice, that's why they do the water bath. So I'm going to scrape off the filling here from my beater, and we're going to pour it in. And then we're going to put the filled pan in the oven. Right now I've got a sheet tray, and you'll see that in a second. I've got a sheet tray in the oven, and that's what I'm going to pour the water into. You don't want to get any water in your cheesecake at all. So I'm just kind of scraping the side of the bowl, and then you just kind of scrape it and pour it into your pan. Looks like I've got a lot of extra filling, so I'm going to not use all of it. It does have raw egg in it, so if you want to use all of it up, you can get a bigger pan, like an 8-inch or a 9-inch pan to make your cheesecake in. So now what I'm going to do is try to get all the bubbles out of the mixture that might be in there. There may not be any, but I want to make sure. And that's another way to prevent any cracking from happening to your cheesecake. And I see I got some towel on my cheesecake, so I'm just going to scoop that out. I don't think anyone wants to eat a piece of towel. And I'm going to open my oven door over here. I don't know if you can see this, but there's a sheet pan here on top of the rack. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer this. I like to put it in the middle so that way it bakes evenly. And then I'm gonna take my hot water here. I deliberately chose a pan with a spout so it's easier to pour. The spout kind of helps guide the water. And what I'm gonna do is just pour this in until it comes up about halfway up the side of the cheesecake pan. And this is called a water bath. They also have a fancy French phrase for this too, bain-marie. And it looks like I need some more water, so I'm gonna go get that. I should tell you, you don't have to use such a big pan for the water either. You can use a cake pan, something smaller than this, but bigger than your cheesecake pan. Okay, that's about as much water as that sheet pan will hold. So now you're gonna see some sloshing, but I'm gonna try to do this slowly so that there isn't much. I don't wanna lose all that water. Okay, so now that will bake for 48 minutes or so. And what you'll do when the timer goes off in 48 minutes is you'll reach in with an oven mitt, grab the side of the cheesecake pan, and kind of jiggle it. If the middle looks really liquidy and it's going all over the place, it's not ready yet. What you're looking for is a wiggle in the very center where it hardly wiggles at all, kind of like Jell-O. If you wiggle Jell-O, it'll wiggle a little bit, but not a lot. So you just want a little bit of a wiggle, and then you know it's ready. So if it's not ready at 48 minutes, what you'll want to do is bake it for another 10 minutes, check it again, and keep baking it every 5 or 10 minutes and checking it. When it's done, when it has just that little tiny wiggle, what you'll want to do is crack your oven door by putting like a wooden spoon or something in the opening and let it sit in a turned off oven for about 15 minutes or so. And then when the 15 minutes are up, you want to set it out on your counter for another hour or so, and then you can put it in the fridge. It needs to sit in your fridge for about an hour, even overnight works too. Then you can slice it and serve it.